Imagine waking up night after night to the sound of your lawn being destroyed by the same arrogant neighbor. The headlights slice through your bedroom window, the engine roars, and the tires rip across the grass you worked so hard to keep alive. That is exactly what happened to Marcus, a proud homeowner who found himself at war with the most entitled HOA Kerren you will ever meet. But instead of backing down, he set a trap so clever and so devastating that it left her humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood and the whole internet. The sound came first, a low, crunching groan that made Marcus snap awake in the dark. His heart pounded. His headlights bled across his bedroom wall, the glow sliding like a blade of white through the blinds. He knew that sound too well, tires grinding into soil is soil. He threw back the blanket and hurried to the window, pressing his hand to the glass. The beams swept across his lawn, cutting a scar of light over grass. He had water-trimmed, cared for with pride in there. It was again that brutal crunch of rubber sinking into earth. His lawn was being violated again. His stomach knotted with fury as he watched the silver SUV roll confidently across the corner of his property, the driver casual, as if she owned the land itself. He clenched his teeth, feeling the humiliation burn inside. Because this was not an accident. He had asked, he had begged, he had tried every polite way to stop her. Her name was Kerren, though Marcus knew her long. Before he knew her name, she carried herself with the smug way of someone who believed rules applied to everyone. But her smile was thin, sharp, her eyes cold. She was the president of the Homeowners Association, and she wielded that title like a weapon. Marcus had seen her scold a neighbor for leaving trash bins visible for a single day. He had watched her threaten fines for grass cut too high. Yet here she was destroying his lawn every other evening with complete disregard. Marcus had worked years to afford this house. It was not grand, not some mansion, but to him it was everything, a safe place, a dream realized. He had scrubbed the porch himself, painted the shutters himself, and taken real joy in mowing the lawn. Just right, the green blades represented his effort, his roots in the neighborhood, his pride and ownership. That pride was being ground into mud beneath the weight of her tires. The next morning, he caught her pulling into her driveway, the silver SUV glinting under the sun. He walked across the street, heart pounding, but his voice steady. "Excuse me, Kerren, I need to ask you again. Please stop driving across my lawn. It is damaging the grass." She did not flinch. She barely glanced at him as she opened her mailbox. "It is not a big deal." She said, her tone was syrupy with contempt. "Your lawn is in the way of the quickest route. I have places to be." Marcus, his jaw tightened. "It is still my property." That was when she turned fully toward him, her lips curved into a smile that never touched her eyes. "People like you should be grateful you even live here." She said, her voice dropped enough that no one else on the street would hear it. But Marcus heard every syllable as if it had been carved into stone. "Do not test me, you will not win." The word sank deep into him, sharper than the tire tracks tearing through his grass. He felt a flash of heat behind his eyes, a mix of anger and disbelief. She had made it clear this was not carelessness. This was a challenge, a cruel, deliberate taunt. He tried to stay calm. He reported the damage. He wrote emails to the HOA board. But Kerren was the board. The complaints disappeared into silence. The ruts in his grass deepened week after week. One evening, Marcus placed small solar lights along the edge of the lawn, hoping visibility might stop her. He even planted tiny decorative posts marking the boundary. The next night, he heard the roar of her SUV again. And when he ran out to see the damage, his stomach dropped. The posts were shattered, snapped clean. The little lights lay, broken glass and plastic, crushed into the soil. Kerren had driven through with a grin in the reflection of her windshield. The neighbors noticed. They whispered at block parties. They watched from their windows. Yet no one stepped forward. She held too much sway, too much control. Marcus felt the isolation pressing around him, as if the whole neighborhood had become her stage, and he the unwilling target. But Marcus was not weak. He stood in the wreckage of his lawn. That night, fists curled to his sides, and made a quiet vow enough. He would not let her trample over him forever. And in that moment, the battle between them truly began. The days that followed only deepened the wound in Marcus' pride. Kerren no longer hid her actions. She drove through his lawn in broad daylight, wheels spitting dirt into the air of the SUV, leaving dark gouges in the green. He would be trimming the edges with quiet care, and then her shadow would pass the vehicle, cutting across the boundary like a knife. She slowed just enough to look at him, her stare smug, daring him to speak again. Marcus tried to fight her with rules. He photographed the tracks. He printed out the pictures and attached them to formal complaints. He sent messages to the HOA email and waited for acknowledgement. But every attempt fell into a void weeks later. When he asked about the status of his complaint, she tilted her head with mock confusion and said she never received anything. He knew she was lying. The silence was not ignorance, it was power. Neighbors whispered when he walked by. He caught sympathetic glances from a couple on the corner. An older man who sometimes waved, but their words never left their throats. They were careful their caution. Meant she ruled over more than lawn. She ruled with fear. Marcus felt it press against him every time he saw her smirk. One afternoon, he tried reason again. He stood at the curb as she pulled into her driveway. "Kerren, I am asking for respect. I work hard to maintain my property. You have no right to use it as a shortcut." She leaned out her window sunglasses, reflecting his own angry face. "Respect is earned, Marcus," she said, then revved her engine and drove off, leaving the words hanging like smoke. It grew worse. She began using his lawn, even when it saved her no time circling around to prove she left deep, muddy scars that lingered even after rain washed the surface clean. Marcus repaired and reseeded, but the grass never had a chance to recover before she struck again. Every attempt felt like patching a wound that she delighted in tearing open. In a final effort to protect what was his, Marcus set out small wooden stakes, painted white. He hammered them into the edge of his lawn, marking a line. Clearly, he even tied a bright ribbon across them, a soft barrier not meant to hurt anyone, only to remind her the boundary. For one night, he slept easier, hoping the message had been received. The next morning he stepped outside and felt his chest collapse. The ribbon was shredded, fluttering in tatters. The stakes lay broken, splintered under tire marks that cut fresh across the damp grass. He looked up in time to see Kerren waving from her window as she rolled past. "Nice decorations," she shouted before laughing her way down the street. That laugh echoed inside him long after she was gone. It was not just about grass anymore. It was not even about property. It was about dignity, about being mocked in his own home, about being silenced. When he raised his voice, she had turned his life into her personal game, and she was winning. He sat on his porch that evening, staring at the torn ground, his thoughts storming in silence. He remembered the first time he stood on that lawn when the house was finally his, a sense of triumph. He had felt the way his mother had hugged him, saying he had built something no one could take away. Yet here, he was watching someone grind that dream into the dirt with no consequence. Something hardened inside Marcus that night. He realized the truth. He could not win by pleading with her. He could not rely on the board she controlled, or the neighbors who feared her direct confrontation only gave her more satisfaction. She thrived on his frustration. The only way forward was strategy, not emotion. He would need to think smarter than her. He would need to set a trap, one she could not escape. When he stood the next morning, there was no hesitation in his posture. His eyes no longer carried the despair of a man losing ground, but the focus of someone preparing for battle. Kerren might still believe she owned the stage, but Marcus had decided the next act would belong to him. Marcus began to plan in silence. He spent evenings searching for ideas, reading late into the night. The glow of his laptop lit the determination in his eyes. He wanted something that would stop her, but also protect him from legal risk. The answer came slowly, a simple idea dressed in patience. He read about devices meant to keep cars from trespassing, spikes that punctured tires yet caused no harm to people or pets. The concept rooted itself in his mind like a seed. He drove to hardware stores, blending in, as if shopping for ordinary supplies, nails, boards, tools, simple things. He purchased rolls of turf. To disguise his plan, his hands worked steady. As he prepared in secret each strike of the hammer, was measured each placement, thought through. He crafted a narrow strip of defense, low sharp points, angled perfectly to catch a tire. But hidden beneath fresh grass from above, it looked like an ordinary patch of lawn from within. It was a silent warning, a line she could not cross without consequence. As he worked, Marcus felt something he had not felt in weeks. Control. His chest no longer tightened with helpless anger, his mind sharpened with focus. He imagined her smirk fading, replaced by shock. Imagined her grip on the wheel tightening. As she realized she had lost for once, he smiled. When night fell, he walked across the lawn, inspecting his work. The moon lit the dew across the blades of grass, hiding the secret teeth below. He pressed a foot gently onto the surface, satisfied that it looked natural. No one would know until they tried. He looked back at the house, his home, standing proud against the sky, and whispered to himself, "It is mine, it will stay mine." Kerren, meanwhile, continued her performance. She strutted through HOA meetings, boasting of her influence, dismissing complaints with a wave of her hand. At one meeting, she looked directly at Marcus across the table and said, "Some people just are not cut out for this neighborhood. They bring down the standard." Laughter rippled among a few timid followers, but others lowered their eyes. Marcus stayed silent, let her arrogance build higher, knowing the fall would be steep. Word began to spread. Quietly, a couple of neighbors approached Marcus in hushed tones. When Kerren was not near, a young mother whispered that she supported him. An older man with a cane patted his shoulder, saying, "You are not alone, son. Their small acts of solidarity fueled his resolve. The cracks in Kerren's facade were beginning to show. Still the night stretched long. Marcus would lie awake listening for the rumble of her SUV, wondering if tonight would be the night. She had grown careless bold, driving faster across his lawn, as though daring him to resist the anticipation built, until each sound of distant tires set his pulse racing. Finally, the moment drew near. He saw her SUV parked across the street. Gleaming beneath the streetlight, Kerren stepped out in her neat jacket, waving to a neighbor with false sweetness. Before climbing behind the wheel, Marcus stood behind his blinds, watching. His hands were steady, his breathing calm, his trap was ready. The SUV engine roared to life, headlights cutting across the dark. Marcus leaned closer to glass as the vehicle rolled forward toward the edge of his lawn. She was coming again, certain of her dominance, unaware that the ground no longer belonged to her arrogance. The night was silent, except for the steady hum of her engine, the crunch of tires nearing the boundary. Marcus felt his heartbeat slow, deliberate, each thump echoing the weight of his decision. The line had been drawn. She would cross it. He was ready. The SUV rolled forward, and Marcus watched the beams of light spread across the street. Her tires hit the edge of his lawn with the same careless force. As always, the sound came sharp, then changed. A heavy pop split the night, followed by another. The SUV lurched as if struck by an invisible wall. The tires hissed and collapsed under her weight. Kerren gripped the wheel, jerking it wildly, but the damage was instant. The rim ground against the earth, sparks scraping as the vehicle tilted to a halt, half on the street, half in the mud. Her scream cut to the silence, a shrill mix of shock and rage. She flung her door open and stumbled out, glaring at the ground and at Marcus' house. "What did you do?" She shouted. Her voice echoed off the quiet homes. Neighbors peeked from curtains, doors creaked. Open spectacle was too loud to ignore. Marcus stepped onto his porch, calm, steady, his arms crossed as he looked down at her. "You drove on my lawn again, Kerren." She pointed at the ground, furious. "You put something here. You attacked me. This is sabotage." By now, more neighbors had gathered. Phones appeared, screens glowing as they recorded. Some whispered, others chuckled at the sight of the almighty HOA president stranded with shredded tires. The humiliation spread across her face, crimson with fury. Kerren stomped closer, jabbing a finger toward Marcus. "You are finished. I will have you arrested. You will regret this." Blue lights suddenly washed across the street. A patrol car pulled up, the officers stepping out after hearing the commotion. Kerren ran to them, voice breaking with false panic. "He set a trap. He destroyed my car. He endangered me." The officer knelt by the edge of the lawn, shining his flashlight across the grass. He saw the faint line of metal hidden beneath the turf, then traced the tire tracks that cut across the property. He stood and looked at Kerren. "These are on his land, ma'am. You trespassed." Kerren froze, disbelief twisting her features. "What, are you blind? He tried to kill me." Another officer shook his head. "They are not harmful to people. They are designed to stop vehicles, and they are on his property. You chose to drive here. You caused your own damage." The neighbors erupted in laughter, soft at first, then growing louder. The phones captured every word, every reaction. Kerren's authority crumbled under the weight of witnesses. Marcus remained silent, letting the scene play out. He did not need to gloat. Her downfall spoke for itself. Kerren screamed again, pointing at the phones. "Stop filming. Put those away. This is harassment." But no one listened. Teenagers shouted, "Smile for the internet, Kerren," and laughter rolled across the block. The officers called for a tow truck. Her SUV sat wounded, its rim scarred, its tires shredded beyond repair. She stood beside it, trembling with fury, her jaw tight, her eyes wet not with sadness, but with shame. She realized she could not win, not here, not tonight. When the tow arrived, neighbors stood in clusters, whispering. Some congratulated Marcus. Quietly, others openly patted his back. Kerren tried to demand silence, tried to command the respect she once forced through fear, but every word fell flat. Her voice no longer held power. She was only noise now. Marcus returned to his porch. He breathed deep the cool night air, feeling the weight of weeks of frustration lift from his chest. His lawn was scarred, but his spirit was whole. He had drawn a line and defended it. Without raising a hand, his mother's words returned to him. "You built something no one can take away." Days later, the video spread across social media. The clip of Kerren shrieking at officers went viral. Neighbors shared it. Strangers laughed at it. Memes sprouted. Overnight, her name became a joke. Whispered with mockery at grocery stores, spoken with smirks in coffee shops. Even a board turned against her, stripped of her title. She vanished from meetings, her power gone. Marcus watered his lawn one morning, watching the fresh green sprouts push through the soil. The sun lit the blades with promise. Children rode their bikes past, shouting about the viral video, laughing at the memory of the Kerren. Before flat tires, Marcus smiled. He had not only won, he had turned her arrogance into her own undoing. As he coiled the hose, he looked once more across the street. Her driveway was empty. Her presence erased the neighborhood, was quieter. Freer's victory was not loud, but it was lasting. He whispered to himself with a grin, "This is my home." And for the first time in a long time, the words felt safe.